Welcome to the freshgigs.ca interviews.
So my name is David Brodie. I'm the Vice President of Western Canada with Citizen Optimum, a global public relations firm, part of the Citizen Relations Network. I've been doing it for, I guess, about 6 years that I've been working here and heading up the agency here in Vancouver for about the last year and a half.
And what does your typical day look like, in your current role?
That's a great question. A typical day in public relations, I think one of the great things about working in PR is there is no typical day. The mix of clients and the mix of projects that you work on is so diverse that you can be dealing with everything from helping a consumer packaged goods company deal with a crisis situation in the morning to a mining company that you're helping with media training in the afternoon to a travel tourism brand that you're helping build out a social media strategy for later that day as well. So it is extremely varied.
Right. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in public relations.
It started, I guess my involvement in public relations really came out of some of the work I did straight out of university. Right out of university, I landed a job working in politics down in Ottawa as a senior advisor with, at the time, Minister of Finance. I sort of stayed with that career for 7 or 8 years through to when he became Prime Minister and worked as an advisor with the Minister's office as well. And coming out of that, the part of the job that I always enjoyed the most was the interaction with the media and the communications side of it, which made sort of a natural transition to public relations after.
And what would you say are the most important skills that someone in public relations needs? So if someone said, I want to get involved in public relations, what would you tell them are the skills that they need to master or learn?
I think there's sort of basic fundamental skills that anybody working in PR needs. You've got to have strong writing skills, strong communication skills. Research, which a lot of people take for granted. Research is the core of every program we build out for clients. So people who are effective researchers and know how to follow trends. I think it's almost being a bit of a sociologist at times as well. It is an incredibly important skill set. And more the work that we do is shifting away from traditional media and much more dealing with sort of citizen journalists and online forms of media, newly emerging forms of media. So it's got to be somebody who is on top of technology, has a strong understanding of that space, and a strong ability to get their message across in those mediums as well.
If someone was going to be applying for a job at a PR company under you or anywhere else, what would impress you when they were to apply?
So in sort of entry-level positions, one of the things we often look for is somebody who it's clear that they've got a strong understanding of and interest in the media, right? And one of the first questions we often ask candidates is, where do you get your news from? Looking at the types of ways that people consume information is an important thing that we look at. And going back to sort of the skill set around social media, people who have shown in their personal lives an aptitude towards that, right? Whether they've got a blog, whether they've got a podcast, whether they're active on Twitter or Facebook, but not just posting in a personal way, but getting involved on behalf of organizations and helping them use those mediums. Quite often people who come to us in entry-level positions might have volunteered for a not-for-profit organization or done sort of project-based work for small businesses and use that as a sort of launching point to get involved in the industry.
How important would you say is social media to public relations?
On a scale of 10, probably 11 would be how important I would place it. It is more and more where people are consuming news and consuming information, and I think it's a far more measurable medium in a lot of ways than other ways of consuming news. It's hard to tell when something runs on a newscast or in a local paper. You've got ratings metrics to look back against, but online there's some very measurable metrics to go back to. How many click-throughs, how many views, and as a result of that, how many people actually click through to purchase something, for example, or taking another action that you might be looking for them to take online.
What would you say is the most challenging part of your job?
It's a great question. The most challenging part of my job is probably, that's a good question. I think probably one of the most challenging parts of working in PR, and one of the parts that I really love, is the pace of change, right? Our industry is changing so dramatically on a day-to-day basis, and a lot of that is because of some of the changes that are happening to the media, right? You're seeing newsrooms become smaller and smaller. Their business models are evolving. They're not the same as they were 5 years ago, or in some cases even 6 months ago. And people working in public relations have got to have a really clear understanding of how that's impacting newsrooms, how that's impacting the journalists that you're reaching out to. And that pace of change, I would say, is probably one of the biggest challenges for people working in PR.
If you were to forecast into the future, what do you see as maybe one of the biggest trends or shifts that will shape the industry going forward?
I mean, I think certainly it's going to come out of how do traditional media outlets evolve, and how do they find a new business model that works for them. And I don't think in the Canadian context, nobody knows the answer to that question yet. I mean, you're seeing major national newspapers like the Toronto Star had massive layoffs just a few weeks back. How is that all going to play out over time? Because I think the interesting thing is a lot of the most influential voices in terms of the ongoing public discussion, even online, are traditional journalists. I mean, a lot of the most influential bloggers in Canada are people who write for traditional newspapers, or who are broadcasters in television or radio. But they still got to find a way to make a business out of that, and how PR is able to adapt to that, I think, is going to be really interesting to watch in the next few years.
For more interviews, industry articles, and the latest jobs, visit www.freshgigs.ca.